Nothing kills an illustration faster than monotony. If you've ever struggled with filling large areas of your drawing and felt like a flat block of color just kills the vibe, this lesson is for you. In this video, you'll discover how to work with color in a way that captures the feel of real markers. Instead of a flat, solid fill, you'll learn to build color as a mosaic of strokes. You'll find out which strokes to use, what direction to lay them down, and how to create smooth shifts in tone within a single color. By the end, you'll be able to create basic color fills that set up a strong foundation for your illustration and use marker techniques in a way that gives your drawing that fresh, dynamic feel right from the very first stage. Welcome to the third episode in the Wooden Door with Floral Accent series. If you skipped the previous lesson on line drawing, I recommend going back to it first. But if you are the kind of person who just can't wait to work with color and start testing out the marker brushes, no worries. You can download the line drawing using the link in the description. You'll also find a link there to the Marker Studio brush set, which we'll be using in every lesson that follows. We talked about it in detail back in the first lesson. I always start by locking the layers I don't want to accidentally draw on. That's the paper texture layer and the line drawing layer. If you're working on the canvas from the set, those texture layers are already locked by default. All you need to do is create a new layer for color drawing and place it right under the line layer. When it comes to color, traditional markers are always applied from light to dark, because a lighter shade can cover a darker one. To capture that same marker technique in Procreate, follow the exact same strategy. Before you begin, install the Copic-inspired palettes from the Marker Studio set. All the color choices in this series will come from there. Start with a light, warm shade. And for convenience, make sure to open the reference window so you can keep the photo on hand while you work. If you look closely, the yellow wall isn't just a flat block of color, it's more complex. There's a gradient running from darker to lighter tones. Let's start with a basic shade and lay down strokes with light, easy movements. Notice how the strokes almost stick to the objects in the drawing, loosely following their edges, but in a free, relaxed way without any harsh outlines. By the way, if you're not using the canvas from the set, but edit your own paper texture layer, switch its blend mode to linear burn. When marker strokes are placed beneath that layer, the paper texture will show through. Another option is to paint right on top, and once you're done, slide the illustration under the texture so it shows across the whole piece. Gradually place strokes on both the right and left sides. Let them stick to the shape of each object. Next to a vertical form, build a vertical patch of color. In some areas, add single strokes with just one touch. This creates a special kind of mosaic, where overlapping strokes form subtle layers. The lighter the color, the less noticeable this effect becomes, which is why it's not as obvious here. These first steps are meant to feel creative, light, and sketch-like. Work around the small pot with light strokes to create a beautiful patch of color. Since the foliage is darker than the background, so feel free to keep laying strokes over the wall in that spot. The farther from the center of the composition, the larger the patches can become. A few strokes can stay isolated, which creates that light, sketchy effect, and that also helps define the overall style. You can also try adding quick, easy strokes, where the final movement lifts off lightly. The same color can give you lighter or darker strokes, depending on how much pressure you use. In some areas, you can add small patches that deliberately don't blend together. This puts the focus on the fact that the wall isn't perfectly smooth, but has a more complex, worn texture. In the center of the composition, there is no need to leave many translucent spots. The tone should be denser here. On the edges, leaving a couple of smaller strokes completes the overall fill. Under the door, don't leave any gaps. The tone there should stay solid. Add a stroke of this warm yellow to the bottom step as well. At this first stage, some objects can also get a light underlayer with the base shade. Even though the pots and tiles are a different color, add a few light strokes in those areas too. This step helps the colors feel more connected. That's why, even in places where this shade doesn't seem obvious, it's still worth adding a few light touches. The base color appears in the other elements and ties them together. Even in the glass section of the door, you can spot some warm tones, so add this shade there as well. If you stick to classic marker technique, there is no need to work on multiple layers. Darker shades can simply be applied right over the lighter ones on the same layer. Next, pick a similar shade to add some variety to the fill. Choose a more greenish shade, since the reference shows a slightly cooler tone on the wall. This shade works beautifully along the edges of the wall. Bring those patches a little higher and let them overlap with the existing fill. It's up to you how much you want to expand this area by adding this new tone. The key is to keep every object on the wall surrounded by abstract patches of color. At the same time, it's just as important to leave some areas of white canvas showing, so the empty space also plays a role in the overall composition. The result is a very natural, nuanced gradient. At this stage, there is no need to switch from the broad tip brush. It handles these sketchy patches perfectly. The new shade makes the fill look richer, but there is no need to completely cover the first transparent layer. Toward the center of the composition, the color can be kept more opaque, while along the edges it can stay more translucent. There is no need to carefully avoid the objects that will eventually be dark. Go ahead and cover them with the background color. This way you won't end up with too many distracting white spots. Add this greenish tone step by step, wherever it feels right to balance the drawing. Bring this color into the foliage area and let it run across the pot as well. Add a touch inside the window and on a small pot as well. This will serve as a base for later work. A warmer tone can be added to the wall fill, since you can see hints of it in the lower part of the reference. Adding that warmth brings more variety to the colors and gives the wall a texture that feels a bit like old plaster. That's what makes this surface more expressive, but it's important not to overdo it. At this stage, the artwork already has a light, airy base with interesting color mixes, so there is no need for significant changes. Just small adjustments, mainly in the lower part, where the wall needs a touch more shadow. You might also want to darken the wall a bit where cast shadows are expected. There is no reason to keep the color translucent there. Lightly suggest the line where the wall meets the ground. Later, it can always be shifted a little higher if needed. Notice how this approach changes the way the artwork feels. Even at this unfinished, in-between stage, it already looks cohesive and expressive. At this point, it's time to add some new colors. Start with the lightest shades, like those on the door frame. And it doesn't have to be plain gray. Soft gray lavender tones or warmer hues from the warm gray palette, the ones marked with W, can work beautifully too. Sometimes exaggerating the color a little makes it more appealing and expressive. When applying the gray tone, you'll notice that the lighter layer doesn't cover the darker one, just like with real markers. This makes the process of replicating marker technique very convenient, though it's still important to think a step ahead. The door frame also has a marble-like texture. Don't try to reproduce it literally. It's better to express it through abstract strokes. Lay down some small separate patches and then switch to a new color. A cooler lilac shade works well here, especially if you use the more textured broad tip grunge brush. It creates a slightly rough, torn edge stroke. Adjust the brush size a little if needed. Notice how this texture instantly brings more life to the area you've already filled. Along with vertical and horizontal strokes, you can also add diagonals. In this case though, the stroke turned out a bit too dark and doesn't quite fit, so switch back to a warm gray to refine the area around the door. Vertical strokes, by the way, can also look nice on a curved surface. Just make sure to keep the contrast between light and dark. Don't overload the parts that need to stay bright. Pick up the next gray shade and try adding a few darker accents. The key is to work delicately in small touches without overdoing it. Most likely that will be enough, and it's better to continue again with the previous gray. Use this color to fill the inner section. Then take an even darker shade, reduce the brush size, and darken the area. Don't draw a solid outline. Build the line stroke by stroke, leaving small gaps in between. Rounded strokes take a bit of control, so rotate the canvas as needed to make the movement easier. In some spots, it's worth letting this color run onto the edges. You can keep working with the same brush or switch to the dyeing brush, which mimics the look of a dried out marker and creates a very soft outline. At a larger size, it can also be used to add dark patches that slightly resemble marble texture. This is an optional technique, but it's especially handy when you want to create textures like this. You can darken this section a bit. But if you undo that step, the soft transition here also looks really nice. In digital illustration, every creative process comes with the option to change or undo a move if it doesn't feel right. There is no strict formula that gives all the answers. Some choices fall away, while new ones appear in the middle of drawing. That's why it's important to stay relaxed and follow your own sense of how the artwork should look. You might add a few vertical strokes to emphasize the direction of the surface, and the dyeing brush handles that especially well. And if something feels out of place, switch to a lighter shade to achieve a soft, delicate effect. Even though the step edge is light, keep using the same color. In sketching, there isn't always time to switch shades too often. Of course, if you want, you can pick a lighter tone instead. Now move on to the shadow areas of the pot. Use the dyeing brush here. It works beautifully on small details, giving them a very pleasing effect. Let's add a base layer for the mailbox. Don't make this dark element too deep right away. It's better to start with a middle layer that later blends the strong contrast of the object with the rest of the composition. The window area here is quite gray. You can use either brush number 1 or the broad tip. Since brush number 1 will be needed for later steps, go with the broad tip for now, and fill the window space with light, quick strokes, moving both horizontally and vertically. Later, once the contrasting window frames are added, everything will look balanced and harmonious. So that's it for today. We've laid down the base fills and started shaping the atmosphere of the scene. For me, working on small details has always felt easier than filling in large spaces. Which part do you find more challenging? Share in the comments, and if you have questions about today's process, drop them there too. In the next episode, we'll explore how to suggest window reflections with abstract patches and how to capture the feel of wood without drawing every detail. So subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next video, and keep building this illustration together step by step. See you in the next video!